I started a second run on Dragon Age the Veilguard because I personally really enjoy this game. And in my second run, where I get to play as a Shadow Dragon mage who romances Lucanus and thus saves Treviso over Minrathous for the extra drama and angst because I'm about that life. As I got faced with the devastation that took over Minrathous in the wave of the blighted dragon attack and compared it with the devastation that was Treviso when I didn't choose to save that city, which was my first choice, which was my choice in my first run, it occurred to me that it is possible that the city we choose to save might say more about what we think about resistance fighters and who we think should bear the brunt of a war and the devastation it can wreak. And it is something I've been battling because I do intend to play this game at least 7 times to romance all the companions because I find them all hot. And it's after my 7th playthrough, after I've taken all the possible choices and the permutations that are birthed from them, that I would then decide what my canon run would be, i.e., who my canon rook is, their faction, the choices they make, the love interest they romance, and what city they choose to save. And just in case, for those who need the warning or heads up, I'm only sharing spoilers up until the city choice and some of the devastation we get to witness afterwards. So, more here is what the city now looks like shots and not actual story beats, as I know there are people who are still playing this game and I don't want to spoil the experience for them. Now, before I jump straight into the conversation and analysis of what your city choice says about you and what matters to you more with regards who you consider more important in the grand scale of things. Hello, I'm Noria. Welcome to my channel where I talk about characters, themes, narratives, and story structure and beats across various media: movies, TV shows, anime, books, and video games. If that sounds like something you're interested in, because I know not everybody's about that life, then consider checking out my other videos. If you like what I have to say and how varied my interests are, then consider hitting the subscribe button. If, however, you're someone who loves watching playthroughs, then maybe consider checking out my other channel as well. P.S. It's Noria. I'll leave the link to it in the description box. With that done, let's move on to talk about the city choice and what it could possibly say about you as a person. Now, before I dive fully into this analysis, I will like to say a little caveat. I am not a psychologist. I am not professionally trained on this topic. I'm just doing that thing where choices and decisions in a piece of media can give you an inkling into what matters to you as a human being. I might be wrong. All right. But this is for fun anyway, so hopefully you keep that in mind and enjoy the video. And with that said, the question I'm sure a lot of you have right now is, why does it matter? Why does the city you save matter? Because, of course, there's the very obvious answer of the city you choose to save only matters if you plan on romancing Lucanus de la Morte. If you want a shot at him, then it's best you save Treviso, as if you choose Minrathous instead, he would never be willing to romance you. Nev, on the other hand, can be eventually convinced into a romantic partnership, even if you don't choose to save Minrathous. For thoughts on why I think they both respond differently, and why you can romance a hardened Nev but not a hardened Lucanus, might I refer you to the video I made sharing my thoughts on why the story progressed in that particular way. It should have popped up on your screen already. But this video isn't about the romance. It's about your choice in itself, outside of love and romantic entanglements. And if, like me, you are actually trying to embody the full role-playing potential in Veilguard, then it's possible that, due to the consequences of the city choice, you get to decide what kind of person your rook is, and by extension, you yourself. If you're someone who believes that resistance fighters matter, that we need as much numbers as possible, pushing against an authoritarian state, fighting for the people and putting their own bodies on the line to try and help those people have better lives, then you most likely gravitated towards Minrathous. Because you understand that resistant fighters are hard to come by against the larger force of the systems that would seek to have others chained and oppressed. Theirs is a much smaller number. And the Shadow Dragons are the one group in Minrathous that are keeping the more supremacist, openly fascist group that is the Venatori in check. It is only through their existence and presence that things are able to stay in balance. And the Venatori can't make an open grab for power. If you're the type of person, or your rook is the type of character that considers this, for whom this matters, then yes, choosing to save Minrathous instead might be a choice you're more comfortable with. Or maybe you and your rook are people who look at things and situations from a more analytical perspective. Then yes, saving Minrathous might be the better choice. Because when you look at things from a political perspective, then it seems like a terrible strategic decision to let Minrathous fall into the hands of the Venatori that would for sure rush in to fill the power vacuum left after such a catastrophic event. Power-hungry groups like the Venatori can easily use the confusion to not only remove all potential dissidents to their plans, but they would also use the opportunity given to them to remove all their political rivals, those who either directly oppose their views and plans, or those who are centrist to their decisions and can be persuaded into the extremism of wanting to restore Tevinter to its past empire status before its fall. And so therefore, it makes logical sense to believe that they would use all that chaos to take out all their enemies, solidifying their position and effectively hand over Tevinter into the hands of Elganan and Gillanane. And we see this happen in real time following the attack by the dragon. The Venatori make it a show of force, bathing the streets of Minrathous in blood as they go after all the Shadow Dragons and their allies. forcing the group even deeper underground for the sake of its own survival. It's a clear way to show through the story that when fascist elements rise in society, the first thing they do as a show of force is to crush any and all groups of dissent, because absolute power is the only way to ensure that they retain that control. And they are often very public about it too. As someone who grew up right in the midst of military rule, watching the aftermath of that decision with Minrathous hurt even deeper than I'd expected, because it's so jarring how supremacist groups have the exact same modus operandi with their ideologies and actions, whether in reality or in the work of fiction. So if you're someone who doesn't want that to ever even be a case in Minrathous, then you might choose to save the city. If, however, you're someone or role-playing as a rook who instead likes the thought of active resistance, of having the odds stacked against you and rising against that regardless, if you would like to see what active resistance looks like against a supremacist force that would want to see everyone crushed, and yet you and your allies still get to push on, if you would like to experience the hard-won and hard-fought victory of wrenching the city back against or from the Venatori when they thought they had it in the bag, then maybe saving Treviso over Minrathous might be the pick for you. Or maybe you're someone who thinks that, sure, resistance fighters are important for the struggle, but their resistance is meant to serve the people. They resist and fight for better lives for the people. And so therefore, wouldn't choosing to save the people be more important? Because in that scene, when you arrive after having picked up Davrin, and you get to the lighthouse where the other companions greet you with the news of 2 blighted dragons and Rook needing to make the choice of what city they want to save, Nev and Lucanus both present their cases to you. Nev's case is built on the fact that the blighted dragon being allowed to run roughshod over Minrathous would weaken the shadow dragons and thus create an avenue for the Venatori to come in. Lucanus, on the other hand, tells you that the people of Treviso would outrightly die if the dragon is allowed to go off unconfronted in Treviso. The game, even before you see the varying results of your choice in the aftermath of the attack, tells you straight out of the gate that the people who would be most affected by the blighted dragon attack would be the people of Treviso, not the crows. Which is why when you go to Treviso in the aftermath, the Cantori diamond is largely unaffected by the attack. And sure, some of the crows get blighted, but a large majority of them survive. Contrast this with the devastation that is wrought on the shadow dragons in Minrathous. Now, in the difference between a hardened Nev and a hardened Lucanus and why you can romance the former and not the latter video, I did see in the comments people arguing about which city is worse off. And someone's point was that, well, Minrathous loses more of the shadow dragons than Treviso loses crows. And so the right decision should be Minrathous. And that was what made me realize that there is a need to make this video. Because in that statement, I realized that a lot of people are unaware of the ideological thought and question that is behind the choice of which city to save. That is clearly written into that scene. It's not about do more crows die or not. It's about who do you think matters more to be saved? Those who are resisting and fighting, or the common man with no recourse? And trust me, I don't think there's an easy answer to that. Because should we sacrifice those who are fighting for our freedoms just for the sake of the people? Or should we sacrifice the people they are fighting for? In which case, does that not render what and who they are fighting for mute? That's why most of the people in Minrathous survive the attack, albeit a lot of them become actively poorer, which is a commentary about something that happens a lot when fascist groups gain power within a society. Power concentrated means that resources are concentrated, and often they would fill their pockets, the pockets of those in power, because they are not in those positions of power to help the everyday person anyway, but for their own selfish reasons. But I'm sorry, I'm doing that thing again where I lose my train of thought and go off on a tangent. Most of the people in Minrathous survive. The shadow dragons are hunted and killed along with their allies, but the people survive. It's a marked contrast to Treviso, where most of the crows survive, but the people are dying in droves. I also find it an interesting commentary on the comparison between politically motivated and driven deaths and executions, a la Minrathous and the shadow dragons being hunted down by the Venatori, and mass casualties brought on by, say, a natural disaster, for example. I'm not saying that the blight is in any way, any shape, natural, mind you. What I mean though is that we get to see the mass casualty that arises in the face of a disaster of such a monumental scale that it poisons everything around you and leads to the indiscriminate death of everyone caught within it, with its effect and reverberation still being felt long after the fact. If you go back to Treviso, many missions after the choice, you still hear updates of more people dying with each visit. It is a slow poison type of death that is slowly wiping out the civilian population. So if you or your rook are people who believe that civilians should never be put in a position where a large swath of them die in such numbers, then maybe saving Treviso might be the choice for you. If, however, you're someone whose strategic thinking is applied more to matters of economy than more political maneuvering, then you might consider that Treviso is a port city that is clearly central to the moving of goods and services across northern Thedas, and the canals, which is the city's lifeblood, empties itself into the sea. For role-playing purposes, maybe you've considered that a blighted and thus poisoned canal emptying itself into the sea might be a terrible, terrible idea for the rest of the world. and that the blight has the capacity to travel even further than Treviso if allowed to take root. Or maybe you're someone who's read all about how plagues have been spread across the world in century past historically, and thus cannot in good conscience make the decision to not save Treviso. That is also valid. And before you make the comment, yes, I am aware that Minrathous was also blighted. But the devastation we see with what happens with Minrathous and Treviso, it is clear that only one of those two cities has their waters poisoned in a way that it is killing everyone. So, which city should I choose to save then, Noria, is probably the question you're asking right now. And if I'm being honest, the answer to that is I don't know. I'm making this video myself to come to that realization, to process my thoughts. My first run, Larimer Ladair, saved Minrathous. My second run, Darren McCarr, saved Treviso. I'll probably keep alternating like that until I finally arrive at my canon run. And in that case, I would look at who my canon rook is, come back to this video, and in my understanding of their character, decide which choice would be most suited to them and what they believe in. Are they more pragmatic, the end justifies the means type of person? If that's the case, then what matters more to them? The push for freedom or the people for whom that freedom is being fought? If it's the former, then they can justify to themselves as, sure, some people would die, but at least there would be people still alive to continue to fight for those who are left. If it is the latter, then they can justify to themselves as, well, taking up the fight comes with its inherent risk, and sure, some would die, but those who remain do so to fight again and keep pushing onwards. And meanwhile, people survived, so at least that sacrifice was worth it. There are so many ways this can go if we're being honest, and like most ideological choices, I don't really think there's a right or wrong answer. So I'm okay with whatever my final choice ends up being after I've weighed things. But what about you? Which city do you see yourself choosing to save? Not in your first or second run, but in your canonical run. Let me know in the comments. My ass is curious. If you enjoyed this video, do consider hitting the like button. If you didn't, the dislike button is right there. That's less an ideological choice and more you get to decide how you want to respond to my content. If, however, it's more positive and you liked what I had to say, consider sharing this video. It might seem like a small thing, but it does help me reach a wider audience. Which, considering how YouTube has been promoting certain types of gaming content lately, helps new people find my channel and my little corner of the internet. This in turn is incredibly supportive of the type of content I make, which I know and accept is not for everybody. And I'm okay with that. Speaking of support though, a huge thank you to my patrons who have been instrumental in helping me keep the lights on. Thank you so much, you all, for your support. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, the link to do so is in the description box. I make new videos 3 times a week. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Whilst you wait for new content from me, do consider checking out Monday's video, where I express my opinion on the thought that Dragon Age as a franchise is a series of works that exist within a shared universe. And as such, I, personally, don't think Veilguard is a sequel. Nor do I hold the thought that Rook can be the Dragon Age's shepherd in any regard, as to me, it doesn't really fit the story, which isn't told as sequels, but bits of stories within a shared world. If you'd like to learn more about what I'm talking about, do consider checking out that video. Until next time, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.